And joining us in studio to analyze this data is Adil Nchabeleng, President of the Transform RSA. Adil, thanks so much for your time. Make sense of it all, and especially in light of where the economic growth forecast is going.
I'm actually happy that the mining statistics and data is actually coming out, because it clearly shows that we are not dealing with a South African problem as such. This is a global problem. Right now, the global commodity cycle has reached a plateau, and as a result, is slowly deepening in terms of, it's actually decreasing in terms of consumption. Most countries, particularly China, which used to lead in the consumption of commodities, particularly your platinum, your PGM groups, which is platinum metals group, as well as your iron, or whether it is chrome or other related commodities, are currently at a negative consumption basis, which means countries that used to actually buy and hoard have reached a point where they have bought enough of these minerals and are not in that demand cycle right now. So that is why the prices of platinum, for instance, has been steadily really going down and decreasing, but to a point whereby now it has reached, I mean, if you recall, 2 years ago, it was at about 700 or so. Now it's steadily climbing up, but that does not mean it is backed by consumption. What should have happened in the South African context is South Africa should put together a group of economists, a group of industry experts, a group of, industrialists like ourselves, and start speaking as to how do we take and start stimulating the mining industry's consumption, as well as particularly the commodities. We are one country, by the way, which does not have a board that actually self-prices its commodities and creates the demand as well as the consumption cycles. All other countries that are leading in certain commodities, for instance, oil, gas, we're looking at the diamonds here in the case of like the DBS and them. They know how to control their precious metals. They know how to control their natural resources cycles and everything. And they know how to actually start creating a stimulus within the market by which this particular commodities can remain regular, can be consumed, and can make up part of their mainstream economy.
Okay, so but what you're saying that there needs to be a paradigm shift with regards to managing the supply side, and in cases like this where there's a surplus, that it doesn't impact on the production outcome of mining operations.
Exactly, and the fact that government is absent from this particular discussion is quite problematic. Government should be buying and stockpiling and using the commodity cycles, which is a really good thing in a sense that if I had bought certain precious minerals, I've bought certain precious resources, I've bought certain commodities, I have the leverage to use that as a gain or lose benefit, where I can sell them at a higher price when there is a demand upsurge. In this country, South Africa is selling out all of its production in terms of the minerals as well as the resources. We don't have any strategic minerals policy that talks to making sure that we can maintain the price stability as well as the price consumption of our particular resources.
I mean, how does government then influence the long-standing policy and framework that the sector has enjoyed, primarily when it comes to the export of the mineral wealth, and also the dependence that we have on the mining sector?
Government has not been able to influence, particularly price within the mineral sector and the resources sector, has not been able to literally control the output of minerals. Remember, government can never go and tell a mine and saying our output threshold for this particular quarter or this particular month should be hitting these targets. Those targets are set by mining companies, are set by mining houses, as well as shaft operators. They would speak to their workers as well as miners and saying, guys, we have a target in order to reach for our productivity output. And the target would equate to X amount. We want to produce extra 2% on top of our X amount of minerals with regards to production. In this case, they might say, look, we want 1 million output for this particular month on a particular commodity, whether it is coal, whether it is to do with platinum, whether it's to do with chrome. That has not been led by government. That is why it is a very fluctuating economy. And very worryingly so, is South Africa's economy is solely pegged on minerals resources. It is not an independent economy. What you see in terms of economic activity within the South African framework is mainly auxiliary support services that support the mining sector, whether it is to do with supplying of equipment capital, as well as extractive equipment and technology and solutions and services. It's part of the supply chain, value chain, right, which is linked to the mining sector. Even our agricultural output and sector, we are now at the negative level whereby we are actually a net importer of agricultural products, whereas in the past we used to be a net exporter, by the way, of agricultural products. So we are right now sitting at an economic shutdown state. Minerals are contributing to that particular shutdown. That is why you see mine companies are laying off. The reason for layoffs is actually to further hamper the productivity and the mining output. Because what do you do with an extra 10,000 mine workers in a mine when your target is to reduce output? That is one of the things that is happening.
And you reduce output. I understand that obviously if there is no appetite from your suppliers, or rather customers internationally, to buy the minerals, the impact that all of that has, if you're saying that we have the capacity, the ability to produce at maximum output.
To outproduce, yes, we
Correct.
can do that.
Yeah, but it's deliberately controlled because mining companies only have a certain threshold and then they can move on internationally.
No, actually what they're doing, they are waiting for a cycle. They can put on terms of surface. Some of this, commodities are actually mined and left at surface and sold at a later stage of time. But what is not happening is South African government is not being decisive and saying we are going to start intervening and really having strategic interventions on either going into mine and mining operations in partnership with industry and buy strategic minerals and use those strategic minerals as a lever to buy and sell, by the way. They can do exactly the same thing like you have in an OPEC situation. The oil, producing countries decide on how the price of oil is going to be determined, and they have a club of those who make the decision because they are the producers. In South Africa, we are actually top producers for some of these minerals, particularly platinum and other precious metals. But yet we are not deciding as to how these particular commodities are going to be priced. And the other thing is South Africa is selling off most of its minerals. We do not have industrialization in South Africa. As a result, that the government of South Africa, which is the government of the ANC, has never prioritized beneficiation, has never prioritized industrialization. Let me give you a scenario right now. When you mine platinum, it goes through about 4 cycles to produce an industrial commodity product or a component, which ends up in a catalytic converter, which goes into the car, in the South African cars. Why is it that we only do 2 stages of platinum beneficiation, and then the 2 most critical of high value stages, we let it go offshore, overseas, we sell it to countries that are completely neutral in terms of mineral resources. They don't even have those mineral resources. And they do a 1% beneficiation on that particular mineral, and after that they sell us back the commodities.
How does that narrative change? Because, it's been in time and immemorial that things have been the way they are, especially in the sector.
I think, look, somebody has lied to the politicians to tell them that you cannot beneficiate, you cannot bring about industrialization. It's very simple. I've been to many countries that are actually doing processing of mineral resources. Go to China. You know what happens? Our minerals, which is our ports in South Africa, look like sort of dump yards. You find heaps of minerals that are just scooped up into a back of a ship. That ship takes it to a strategic industrial zone in China, for instance. When it arrives in that industrial zone, it gets taken from the ship, gets put onto the wagons, rail wagons. On those rail wagons, that rail wagon stops only at the industrial zone. In that industrial zone, you're going to find major furnaces, which are actually now furnaces that actually refine. They first do the, the breaking down. They take it, then they refine it. After refining it, then they bring it into their innovation process, where then they create a product out of it. And the only outcome of that particular process of the mineral that they bought ends up in a product that they have already completed, packaged, put onto a shipment. It goes out of the same port. It returns back to the same country of origin as a finished product. Why is South Africa not doing that?
Sure, but then the onus would then be on individual mining houses to have sinter plants and the necessary investment to have a processing or beneficiation element?
We have many plants in South Africa that have been shut down. Many massive refineries, as well as not only just refineries, in terms of plants that used to actually smelters, that used to actually break down some of these minerals and smelt them into ingot status and then take them as now almost a ready to make into a product state mineral. What we're missing in this is the mining industry producing particular raw product and material, bringing it into an industrial zone. From the industrial zone is then smelted, then refined. After the refinement, the high value refinement. Then based on that high value refinement, it is then now broken down into a downstream. The upstream is when they're refining it to the highest level. Then the downstream is when it enters into the, the consumer goods sector market, where it actually gets to produce something out of it. Yeah. For instance,
if you were to give, a percentage point in the level of beneficiation that is currently happening in this sector, how high or low would you pitch it?
There is no beneficiation in South Africa. They're just smelting to make product-ready exports. So there's no beneficiation, because if we're speaking about beneficiation, we're speaking about industrialization. The industrial capability of South Africa has been shut down over the years. Since we adopted the new democratic state of South Africa, there's been a strategic shutdown of various levers of the industry that specialized in terms of smelting, refining, as well as producing into last stage product and production. I mean, talk about a simple thing. Our, solar industry. We buy solar wafers from overseas, Germany, Spain, China, and other, Japan. Why can't we be producing those particular solar technologies, wafers, as well as, the required, technology in South Africa?
Yeah, but isn't the industrialization program, at least initiatives like that, supposed to answer that question?
It's supposed to do it, but the policymakers and the politicians are not even insisting on it. The people in current departments, for instance, you go to DTI, you tell them that, look, we've got this industrial program that will actually change the face of South Africa. The bureaucrats in those offices not necessarily understand what is going on in any way. You're bringing a product, you bring a technology. All that they are doing is saying, take you through the stages of either your plan is going to fail or succeed. And that is why we are actually continuously being robbed of economic development. We are continuously being robbed of industrialization and beneficiations of our minerals. The other thing is government itself is reneging on its own requirements. In the policies of South African government, it says the Minister of Mineral Resources first must give the permission before any mineral is exported, by the way, to say that mineral can be exported, for instance, to China, Germany, or any other country of destination. But it must be exported to that country with a particular reason if that particular product cannot be refined as well as smelted in South Africa. That is not happening. The minister is not taking any action against any export of our mineral resources. He's not standing up and saying, guys, our economic transformation policy, our radical economic transformation policy dictates that industrialization must first start at home. The only point we can interact with some of the international players is when we are selling already a proper refined product to them, and it has the highest value that can integrate into them in terms of their production processes. But we are not doing any of it. Instead, we are taking every ore, we are literally digging out holes out of South Africa, putting them onto the back of a ship or a truck, taking them out of South Africa on a ship, selling them off to somebody else to do exactly what South Africa should be doing.
And then creating much needed employment. But
and that's why there's no jobs, that's why there's no industrialization. And they keep on telling us the old age example that you cannot beneficiate in South Africa because there's no energy. And yet we have programs like the nuclear build programs that should have come into line, that should have been assisting us by today, creating the necessary industrial scale capacity that we need.
Adil, we're going to have to leave it there. Thanks indeed. As always, that's Adil Nchabeleng. He is the president of Transform RSA, reacting to the mining data that came out today. And we move on to other stories now. AMCU has come out guns blazing against Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa. The union says Mareka